We just got done talking to Tim Smith, Vote No campaign manager on KCMO. And at the end of our conversation, we talked about something that I posted on my X page yesterday. And it was how, I've really only seen this one other time in my life where all the political power players, the money, in the case of this election, the famous athletes, were all in on one side, right? I mean, from Quentin Lucas to many of the local political power players, to the Chamber of Commerce, to the Kansas City Sports Commission folks, to the big money, to Patrick Mahomes, to Travis Kelce, to Bobby Witt Jr., to Salvador Perez. They all wanted you to do one thing, and you did the other by a 16-point margin. In a town that's won 4 championships in a decade. That is just stunning, especially when you factor in the margin. And the only other thing I can compare it to in my lifetime is 2016. When in the days leading up to 2016, Washington Post, New York Times, they were all saying that Donald Trump had a 1% chance to win the presidential election. That's what their polling showed. And then he won it. And then he pulled it off. And you had all the money. You had the establishment figures. You had large swaths of the federal government, bureaucracies, every media establishment out there, outside of maybe one or two, who were all in on one side, on Hillary Clinton. The money, everything. And the American people said no. Now, whether you like Trump or you hate Trump doesn't really matter. That's not the point. The point is there are, at least in my lifetime, that's the only similarity I can think of that's on this level, where everybody of a certain level was on one side and the people said no. Now, of course, 2016 was not a 16-point blowout. It was, by the skin of his teeth. But there's a large belief, by the way, you go back to that point in time, Donald Trump didn't really think he was going to win. Donald Trump was as shocked as anybody that night. And I will never forget that night and what happened the next morning. And the word, the reports are that Hillary Clinton that night did not even have a concession speech written. Everyone ripped on her and said, well, she didn't want to, she was being a sore loser. She wanted to wait till the next day. Apparently, she didn't have one written. That's why she gave her concession speech the next morning. It was late morning, and I remember it very well because at the time I was working in New York. I was doing stuff at Fox and CBS and Sports Illustrated and some different places. And I was at Sports Illustrated that next morning. And at the time, I don't know if this is still the case, but, Time owned SI. So Time Magazine was on the same floor as us. And as a result, they're obviously covering this. And I remember standing in the Time Magazine newsroom area, and they've got the Hillary concession speech and all the big screen TVs. And there were young reporters, or I don't know what they were, if they were just workers, employees, whatever. I don't know if they were reporters, but there were employees tearing up as Hillary's giving her concession speech. I'm not kidding you.
She's a real beauty.
No, they were. They were literally, I was like hearing the sniffles from the newsroom. They were crying. And I will never in my life forget that moment. Because one, it was like, this is a newsroom. Get serious. Grow up, you hacks. And then part two was like, these people are so out of touch. It never even crossed their minds that Donald Trump could possibly win this thing. And while I don't think the yes side was nearly as arrogant at all, I think they realized this was going to be a coin flip either way. Now, they didn't see a 16-point blowout coming, but I thought if they thought they were going to win, it was probably going to be by a razor-thin margin. The fact is, as Tim Smith pointed out, they were still paying off, and that's what I'm going to call it. When you're giving Freedom Inc. here in this town $125,000, you're not doing that out of the goodness of your heart just because, they're good folks. No, you're buying out votes. That's what you're hoping for, at least. You're buying votes. You're buying them off. You're buying what you thought were traditional political power players in this town But I will give Tim Smith this much. Social media has in part changed the game. And he's right to point out, too, that spending all your money on TV is a thing of the past. You know, you're going to actually reach far more involved younger people at a much better rate on radio. And when you combine radio with the social media, digital advertising he's talking about, that should be the wave of the future. But here's the thing. People involved in campaigns, including candidates and people that run them, want to see themselves on television. It's ego. I'm saying this, and I know that there's probably folks in TV in this town screaming at their radios because I'm letting the cat out of the bag, so to speak, but it is an enormous waste. It is not an efficient use of any campaign's dollars. If you were to take the cost effectiveness of radio, combine it with what Tim's talking about with digital, you've got winners on your hands potentially left and right. You get the broad appeal where you need it at a much better rate here doing this, and then you get the targeted, aspect of what social media can do, and all of a sudden, you're off to the races. Now, do I think the no vote would have won for the most part no matter what? Yes, I do. And he's right. The vote no side did not have a lot of money. I'm not going to say it's all because of their social media ads that the vote no side won. No, I'm not giving all the credit to that at all. But I understand. Listen, the guy's the campaign manager, so he's got to crow a little bit too.
People are quick to draw cause and effect without looking into it. Yeah, it's a little soon, but certainly it helped. And as you point, it is the business model moving forward for sure.
Yeah, it's changing rapidly. There's no doubt about it, because that's where the attention is in large part. But I think, too, about like these Facebook groups like Save the K. They were obviously big on the vote no. But the K is not being saved. The Royals have made that abundantly clear. So like that Facebook group that really grew impressively, organically, they got, well over 10,000 members. They made a lot of noise on social media. What happens to them? What do they do next? I don't know, but I guess we'll just wait and see.
Well, and that can have people that aren't in Jackson County, so that's from all across the metro, so its membership may look big, but, they're non-voters in that sense.
Yes, exactly. How many voters in that group actually, could vote and were able to vote? Yeah, because you're right. I mean, I saw what that group was doing. I'm not a Jackson County resident. So anyone could join it, to your point there, John.
Mm-hmm.
And that's something that, it's not downplaying what they did. They had a strong grassroots movement, but it's just noting that it's important, but it's not everything. You got to be able to hit it on all fronts. That's indisputable as you look at these campaigns and where they go and how they move forward. And now you sit there and you say, okay, what's next? Well, a lot of reporting about how Kansas now is suddenly like, whoa, look at us over here. Stop. Now, I need to get an expert on the show tomorrow to talk about these star bonds that everybody's talking about. But the reality is this: if Kansas were to ever try to lure both teams or either team, it would have to be with state monies. I'm just going to, point it out because I'm sick of getting these stupid messages from people who are listening to sports radio who don't know what they're talking about. But sports radio guys are on there yapping about how the Kansas governor has the ability to get her hands on over $1 billion right now without even going to a public vote. Now, I get it. These guys are used to talking about balls and strikes, literally, and like first downs and touchdowns. But do you understand that money, the governor does not just plop down a bag of cash and say, here you go. There's this thing called the legislature. And I'll share a text with you that I got from somebody who is a prominent Kansas state senator who you would all know. And he sent me this note this morning. He said, I certainly haven't heard any clamor for it over here. He said, it's really been about the media just asking people about the possibility of Kansas. And it may be appearing to stir things up more than they actually are. This person added, I've been involved in negotiations and a lot of stuff these recent weeks around leadership and have not heard one word spoken about it. So that it's just a made-up media narrative. And Laura Kelly's going to dump down a bag of cash and say, here's your $2 billion, guys. Have a field day.
Yeah, I would point that out as I look through for news stories. This is always the media asking someone. And, of course, they're going to get their time and earn the media, they're going to go ahead and have a response.
Of course.
Yeah.
I mean, if you're David Haley, who talked to Channel 9, he's a KCK state senator. I mean, you get free airtime, right? Of course you're going to talk to the media.
Manny Abarca is like the kid in class that always has his hand up every time the teacher asks a question. Right now, we've already got you, Manny. Let someone else speak.
Yeah. Well, Manny's always looking for his next media hit. It's really quite pathetic to watch that Jackson County legislator go about his business. I mean, it is beyond embarrassing. But yeah, I mean, it's really a made-up media narrative right now. And Laura Kelly cannot just take your tax dollars and dump it on the table and say, here you go, Clark Hunt. Here you go, John Sherman. That's like not how this works. There's a legislature involved. And if you're a Kansan, by the way, and you think it's a great idea to just drop your pants and give the teams whatever they want, why? To stick it to Missouri? I mean, that doesn't make any sense. Think about the region broadly speaking. And I promise you, nobody outside of Kansas City cares if the stadium's in Kansas or Missouri. No one cares. Heck, it was Donald Trump after the Super Bowl, the first Super Bowl, who said congratulations to the Kansas City Chiefs, and he had a picture up of the state of Kansas. No one cares.